You are listening to Road to CEO, nothing but in-depth interviews with executives about their journeys as CEO. I'm your host, Will Marlow, and I hope you enjoy the show.
Kind of a low point career-wise was the motivation that, that gave me the spark to try something new.
I'm here today with Joel Reed, the CEO of OpenArc, which is a Pittsburgh-based technology consulting firm. And I think I can summarize OpenArc by saying that they build cool things for you, or they find talented people who can build cool things for you. Is that about right, Joel?
That's a great summary, Will. I love the cool things part that you put in there. We build great software or help you find talent that can build that software for you.
All right. Very cool. All right, so we're going to dive into all of this. We're going to hear about Joel's journey. He's been building OpenArc for about 12 years now, as I understand it, starting from, I assume, 0 employees and now up to about 85. So it's been quite a great success story here, and I'm looking forward to diving in. Joel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Will, for having me. Great to be on your show today.
So let's start at the beginning. What's OpenArc all about? Besides the building cool things and all that. What's the kind of, what's the guiding sort of force between at OpenArc?
No, that's a great question, Will. I'd say 2 things are kind of unify and our core values that kind of drive what we do. And one is transparency, and that comes, you can see that in the OpenArc name, and I can unpack that a little bit. And the other is what I'll call human-centered approach to everything we do in talent and software. So those are just big drivers of who my partner and I are. We want to be transparent people, and we wanted a company that was very transparent, and we believe that helps build trust with our customers and our employees. So from day one, that's been super important to us. And then I think all business at the end of the day is about people and reaching people and delivering value to those people, and whether that's helping them find a new job or finding a great person to add to their team or building software that solves users' problems. It's at the end of the day, it's not about those problems so much as the people and enabling what they want to do. So those are probably the 2 cores that have inspired Bethany and I to build this business.
So tell me about the growth trajectory. So you're at 85 people approximately currently. Have you steadily added people to your team every year, every quarter, or has it been more of kind of a step process where you add a ton of people all at once and then don't hire for a while? What's the growth looked like?
That's a great question. At the beginning, for I'd say the first 5 or 6 years of the company, we seem to be doubling in size, and a constant question was, how many employees are we up to now? After maybe year 8 or something like that, we really stopped asking that question. And because we weren't doubling in size. It wasn't like we were, 160 or 500 or something like that. And B, it just was maybe a little less important, the exact head count for us. But, that we saw really rapid growth in the beginning. And right before the pandemic, we were more around 100, 110 employees. So the pandemic, did scale that number down a little bit. But it's been a journey. It started with just me as an employee working part-time on OpenArc. And so a half-time employee is really what we started with.
Well, to me as a CEO, I always admire, any other CEO founder who's able to go from, a 1-person company up to, a team of almost any size. It's an impressive accomplishment.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned the pandemic and having to scale down, and we're recording this in the end of August 2022 here. So, the memories of the pandemic are probably fading for a lot of people. So I want to maybe turn back to that for a moment. What was that like going through? I mean, I know what it was like for me as a CEO, but what was it like for you to March 2020, the pandemic is declared, a global health pandemic, and everything starts
Yeah.
shutting down. What was that like?
Yeah. You're right. It's fading a little bit. From memory, my family and I were at Universal Studios a few weeks before everything got shut down. And I remember like trying not to touch too many things because we were starting to hear the stories of this thing happening and no one quite knew the impact of that. But when and we actually had our whole sales team on an island somewhere in the Caribbean, enjoying like the last year's sales and celebrating that. And they almost got trapped there because they were shutting down the planes and everything. So it was quite something when all that was happening. But yeah, I remember when the word went out that all businesses had to close their offices, and only essential businesses could be open, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, the government didn't think it was essential that we were still open. So we went from everyone in house to fully remote overnight, as everyone else did, and that was quite an experience for all of us. I really appreciated how my team leaned into that and made it a success. I I hadn't looked at the mail, for example, for probably 3 or 4 years, and I started having to go get the mail and deposit checks, which I hadn't done for probably 8 years. And my controller is fine with that. He walked me through it and showed me how to do it. But everyone just came together and we figured it out. And I think it was a time probably that all of us experienced where there was a sense of camaraderie, and we got to get through this together. It's better together than by yourself, kind of a thing. I think we all probably felt that, and I definitely had that from my team. So that was crucial for getting through that time.
Yeah.
It was it was shocking for all of us, and probably no none of us will forget it.
No, I agree with that. For me, I had a different experience though, because my company's been fully remote before the pandemic started. And so I didn't actually have that kind of jarring experience where we had to
Yeah.
go from the office to the home. So I think from that perspective, it was different. What about from a client perspective? I mean, it sounds like you might have taken a revenue hit, because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
How did that unfold?
Yeah, great question, Will, and I'm glad to hear you were already fully remote. That made it a lot easier for you. We had one of our largest customers went out of business a few months later and told us that they couldn't pay a very large outstanding bill that they
Mm,
had with us. And so to your point, there was definitely some financial implications that we had to
yeah,
work through because of the pandemic. And yeah, so it was, and then another customer of ours, one of the largest projects that we had, they said, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're gonna pause, and we'll talk to you next year. And
yeah,
we had just hired 8 people for that project.
wow,
So yeah, so it was difficult to have to turn around and tell folks that actually we didn't have that project anymore, and also just the financial implications of a very large we can't pay you type
yeah.
situation.
Yeah, that's really rough. So you're right. It was easier for me from the remote perspective, but I had expanded relatively recently into some consumer accounts. So my company is an ad agency, and so often, a lot of our clients are B2B firms, but we had expanded pretty heavily into some consumer firms, and those all went on pause. We didn't lose the accounts, but we allowed them
Mhm.
to go on pause. They weren't able to service, to take on any revenue for their business model. And so we wanted to share the pain with them. I mean, we didn't want to share the pain, but we were
Mm.
willing to, and we
Yeah.
wanted to do the right thing with them. And
Yeah.
but that cost us about 30% of our revenue overnight. And so
Mhm.
it was definitely a rough experience. It took us about, as I recall, about 13 months to fully recover that. After after March 2020,
Mhm.
and then I can't remember, but some 3 to 6 months later, we were significantly better off than we were before. So
Mm.
it was, it's been a good turnaround, if you want to call it that. But it was brutal in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It definitely was.
how about you? I'm not sure if you can get into numbers or anything. You don't have to go through anything confidential, but was it something where you were able to to pick up new accounts that through the pandemic, or was it is it something you're still dealing with at this point, the recovery?
Yeah. Great question. So on the software side, we've gone back to where we were before that happened, and I don't think it changed the custom software consulting business landscape or business model as much. On the talent side of our business, it's we still have work to do on that front, and I think the whole talent market is a little bit different now. It's had a more fundamental impact on that side, and so we still have more work to do on that front.
So
Eh,
maybe you could talk a little bit about how you feel that the talent market has changed. Is it that people are applying for jobs differently, or they're looking for different things in their jobs? What exactly has shifted in your view?
yeah, great. So there's probably two main things I'd call out. One is an obvious one, just that there's so many more remote
Mm-hmm.
only or remote first type positions available to candidates across the country and around the world. So that has totally changed the landscape of where you are sourcing candidates from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, typically a lot of our customers were in the Pittsburgh area, and we were mostly sourcing Pittsburgh candidates,
Mm-hmm.
pre-pandemic. And now many companies are willing to find talent anywhere, and so we've needed to, along with every other staffing company, expand our where we're searching for talent. And then we're able to service customers in other parts of the country as well. So as you can imagine, everyone's who you're competing with has grown just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
The candidate market has changed. So that's one, the kind of how many remote jobs are available now. And then I think secondly, pre-pandemic, we had a lot of what we would call contractors, people who are maybe hired for a 6 month or 9 month period. And sometimes it's try before you buy type thing. And other times people just, it's not a permanent position they want to have on their staff. Now, after the pandemic, with unemployment rates as low as they are, and the war for talent so intense, every job is really a full-time position. Almost everyone is. It's basically, maybe before the pandemic, it was 40% permanent, what we would call permanent placement, where you get a full-time permanent position, and 60% contract work. And now it's maybe 80% permanent placement and 20% contract, something like that, given the labor market and the war for talent and so forth. So that changes the revenue at
Mm-hmm.
OpenArc, and just also changes the whole recruiting process and interviewing process and so forth. So
That's really interesting. Yeah, a couple interesting things about that, but I want to maybe pick apart one of the things you said. So, in terms of the changing kind of nature of who you can hire, because you can hire people anywhere in the world, or certainly anywhere in the country, whereas before maybe you were limited to, you know, folks who were within 100 miles or so of a company. Do you feel like that's made it harder for you as a staffing firm, but easier for individual companies to find talent for their specific roles, or has it become harder for everybody?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think it's changed anything for our clients in terms of the ease. If anything, I think it might be harder. That might just be a general factor of the the labor market as it is right now. But um, many customers that are coming to us are are challenged finding good talent in this
Yeah,
market, and talent that meets their skill needs and so forth. So
yeah,
I don't have any sense that it's gotten easier for
yeah.
them.
Okay. Okay, well, let's go back to your journey here. So, did you always want to start a firm? Were you always planning on creating a company like this?
um, I'm laughing because when I was about 12 years old, I recognized that if I had a company that you could get free magazines because I saw them like at the doctor's office and other places. So I created a company called Migalot Industries or something. It was some like Lord of the Rings name. And I didn't like really create one, but I said I was the CEO of some company, and I did start getting free magazines, and I thought it was amazing. So
That's pretty
but
cool.
not really, just beyond the free magazine part. That wasn't super high on my radar screen for a long time. I did get to a point in my career in corporate America where I thought I'd hit like a ceiling, and that had been a little frustrating to me. And so it brought me to a place where I wanted to do something new, take a chance. I had done the maybe a little more of the safe thing for most of my career, just risen in the ranks of leadership in corporate America, so to speak, and hit a ceiling that I didn't think needed to be there. And so that kind of low point career wise was the motivation that gave me the spark to try something new. I went to a startup company, and that was right before 2008, with the great financial crisis, and so that startup company, the funding for it disappeared after a short while, a few months, and so that put me even a lower position because I had left the safe position. I went to a startup. That whole crash happened in 2008, and I was really asking myself, how did I get here, and why is this happening? But we, just wrestling through that, and trying to process all the emotions around that, started to look around and say, this consulting company that I found myself in at that time, which was more of an IT consulting company, it became apparent just being there, and interacting with folks that I had learned a lot in corporate America, and that I could do what these folks around me were doing, and maybe apply that learning that I had gotten in corporate America. So found some people that were at a similar point in their careers, and that gave birth to OpenArc. So yeah, it was a process of going from safe to taking a chance,
Hmm.
really, that brought me to this.
And I heard you reference a partner that you have. So, did you
Yeah.
start off with a partner, or did that come
Yes.
later?
Yes. My partner Bethany was working at another company, and they had a big project that they had closed, and they needed someone to lead the software development effort. And so she called me, and I said, if you can get me something where I work 4 days a week, because I'm starting this other company, so give me a job where I only have to work 4 days a week so I can spend the fifth day on OpenArc. And she made that happen because she's amazing at what she does. And that gave birth to our ability for me to start working on OpenArc. And then shortly thereafter, she got to a point where she wanted to do something new and start a company. And so we joined forces. There's been other partners along the way of this journey. But she is, we just had lunch today, and she's a big part of all of our success here.
I hope you're enjoying Road to CEO. It would be great if you took a moment to subscribe either on the YouTube page or wherever you happen to be listening to the podcast. And if you really like the show, it would be great if you leave us a 5-star rating and write a review on Apple Podcast. This will help more people discover the show, which will help us make more episodes.
Secondly, I want to give a shout out to Royku.com, which is our sponsor for the Road to CEO podcast. Royku.com provides a black belt style certification program for people who want to learn how to do Google Ads, SEO, and Google Analytics training. We use Royku.com to train our team at the Marlow agency, and so we love the program, and it has made onboarding new team members much easier and faster, and it also ensures that everyone on our team has an excellent baseline of knowledge for managing paid advertising campaigns. So, head over to Royku.com and either check out the free training lessons there or sign up for the Black Belt program. Now, back to the show.
So, so when you talk about partners, are you, and you've had other partners along the way, you said, are these partners equity holding, partners in OpenArc? Is that what you're referring to?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
I see.
And leadership roles. Yeah.
So how do you treat, partners and partnerships? Is it something where, in the past, I know, when you think of an old Madison Avenue, advertising agency or an old, kind of a law firm, partners would be, having people rise up through the ranks and become a partner was a really important part of making a company durable, and and also just motivating talented people to want to work with you and stay with you. You see less of that nowadays. I think you don't see companies with a lot of partners. How do you think of partners with your business? Is that something where people, you want more of them? How does that work?
That's a great question. And just discussing partners in business could be probably a whole separate 2-hour episode of your podcast here. But we learned a lot over the last 12 years about this and made lots of mistakes over the years. And it's their mistakes or things that I see other business leaders struggling with and working through all the time. So try to do some experience sharing in those conversations. But yeah, we currently, it's Bethany and I, it'll remain Bethany and I, and we're not looking to expand that model beyond the two of us now, based on the lessons that we learned over the years about how challenging that can be to have lots of partners with different amounts of equity and so forth. So, now we have other compensation models, I'll say, that for key leaders and contributors to make sure they feel a sense of ownership and are really excited and engaged with being a part of our success. And I think that's working out much better for us.
I see. Very, very interesting. Any memorable mistakes you'd care to share with the listening audience here?
I'll take maybe an easy one. But there's a big difference between someone who maybe owns 5% of a company versus 50% of the company, in terms of your sensitivity to profit distributions and what those might look like to you, and how long-term you might be thinking of. And so something that might be okay for a 50% holder with a long-term view might be a much more difficult thing for someone to swallow if they've only got 5%. Adding a new partner, for example, is one obvious example, or just making a decision to invest in the business that's going to cost some of the profits. So we found that was that started to introduce
Mhm.
divergences in our thinking, as a leadership team, just because of those equity for differences, no other significant reason. So that's one that comes to mind quickly. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll tell you, this is a slightly related topic. I had an experience with a company some years back that really relied quite a bit on profit sharing. And, it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because on paper and in principle, the profit sharing sounds really nice. Everybody shares in the benefits and the growth.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, long-term investments and those decisions are really made by a small group of people, and then
Yeah.
that has a key, that really determines everything around what that
Yeah.
profit share is going to be. And
Right.
that was one of the things that I wanted to avoid to a certain extent with my company, was having these types of compensation packages that would, it would kind of, put everybody in the same type of situation. But if you don't have control over the decisions of the company, I feel like that tension would, kind of ruined the good intentions of the
Mm-hmm.
profit share itself.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Well, that's kind of similar to what we were seeing on the equity side. Another thing that I think business leaders should think a lot about is how your decision-making ability, and can we make decisions efficiently and quickly as a business with X number of leaders, and what's it going to take to reach consensus? I think you can, if you have too many business partners, put yourself in a position where you almost become paralyzed by the
Mhm.
inability to reach consensus on things. So
Yeah.
it's another one that comes to my mind.
Yeah. So you made a couple references to your role having evolved a bit as CEO over the years. You stopped checking the mail at one point, then you had to deal with that again.
Yeah.
Can you describe what your path has been like as the company has grown? How maybe how has your role changed since starting the company?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It really started off, like I said, at the beginning of programming and doing custom software development. I still like to dabble in that when I get a chance, but I don't get much of a chance. They don't let me write too much code anymore. But uh, early on, it was contributing to client projects and leading those efforts and so forth. Um, at some point, as we grew and maybe we were at 30 or 40 people, it was more of a people leadership role, and helping drive consensus with our partners and so forth. And more recently, I've been working with our leadership team to start to delegate as much of the leadership of the company as I can, so that my partner and I are mostly providing vision for the company, and and being involved in sales and marketing for the company. So less of that people leadership, providing some strategic direction for our team, but letting them figure out the best course of action for those. So it is exciting to be able to see our leadership team grow into those roles, and that's very energizing for me. And I love the customer focused aspect of the sales and marketing part of it, understanding the problems they have and what they're trying to solve, and for and so forth. So it's been great to be able to focus on that. So it has been an evolution, and I think at the end of the day, some of it just comes down to where can I bring the most value, um, and just being flexible, staying flexible for that. If I have to go back to coding, I will go back to that, for some emergent. And actually, I did in the last year because we had a specific need. So I said, I'll do that for a couple months. Yeah, I think you need to stay flexible when you're in a smaller business.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that progression sounds relatively similar to mine. I Now I do try to think of my time in thirds. I do a third of my time focused on internal matters, strategic planning for the company. I would include in that a third of my time on sales and marketing, and a third of my time talking to customers, working with customers to a certain extent. I don't know that there's any real magic to breaking it up that way, but that, for better or worse, is how I try to think of it. I think sometimes, having the hardest part is figuring out for me anyway, is figuring out the balance of how much time and how involved to be in the specifics of certain technical matters. I think a little bit is good. I think it keeps you honest. It keeps you really focused and keeps you on kind of knowledgeable, I guess I'd say, enough to run the company. But it also pulls you in deeper and deeper and deeper. So that line is tough to sometimes, to get.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, I think that's very insightful that it's good to have your feet a little wet in the day-to-day, a little bit. So, frontline what's happening in your company. I learn a ton when I'm introducing our talent team to a new customer and talking through that with them, or being on a software project and just experiencing the day-to-day. And it's also great just to interact with some employees that maybe you don't get to interact with every day and see what they're like. So I totally agree with you.
Is there anything that you have to do as CEO that you would kind of put at the bottom of the list, that you're really, anything you really dislike about your responsibilities as CEO?
Boy, that I have not thought of that. I really
that's a
do
good
enjoy
sign.
it for the most part.
That's a good sign. I mean, that might mean that your team is really utilized very effectively. I'll tell you, for me, I actually, it used to be easy for me to answer that question, but as my team has grown, it's gotten harder and harder and harder to think of things that maybe I shouldn't be doing, that other people should be doing. So I think it's actually maybe it's a good sign that some CEOs, it's easy for them. They know exactly what they hate doing.
I wouldn't say, no, that would be hard. I'd have to think about that. I can't come up with something off the top of my head. I think there's some stress related to leading a company that just comes with that position. That, if I could wave some magic wand and get rid of that's probably the one thing that, be nice not to have, but I don't know that I have that wand to do that. So,
well, if you get that wand, that's going to be
I'll
very
pass it along to you.
You're going to want to change your business at that point and just start selling that thing.
That's right.
So I want to maybe tweak that question a bit and ask: Are there any things that maybe you wish you'd known when you first started your company that now that really helps? That do you ever think back and think, wow, I really used to do this differently, and this now I'm doing it 10 times better?
That's good. It was painful, some of those partner discussions and learnings that we had to go through. I wish I knew more about that when I was starting. Definitely could go back and rewind the tape on that. More recently, I've just found I think being more involved on the sales and marketing part has been really good for me as a leader. Like you were saying earlier, like being close to the customer, I think has been really helpful for me and help articulate better to our team, a vision for where we're headed and what we need to achieve. So I think I probably would have gotten more involved in that sooner than I did. I'd say those two things.
It's interesting because I've done 22, 23 of these these podcast episodes now, and I would say that's one where not everybody says that, but I think that's a very common theme of, needing to be closer and closer to the customer. And some people have big regrets about having gotten disconnected from their customers, and then other folks are kind of more like yourself, or are just kind of, it's a little more nuanced. You want to make yourself more and more kind of connected to them because you see the benefits from it.
Yeah. I just read something on LinkedIn today from a good friend of mine who was talking about great leaders study their customers. And, I think that puts a good frame on it, that how important it is to learn about your customers and what their needs are, and how your services are meeting those or not meeting those, and how they're perceived by them. There's a lot of things that we do that we've talked about as a leadership team that our customers don't totally get why we're doing it, or don't appreciate the value of it, that we've said, we got to stop doing that, or we got to explain it. And those are the kind of things that only can happen, I think, when you're studying the customer, like my friend was talking about.
I think that's a really good way to say it, studying your customer. I mean, I certainly, I think that I probably have tried to approach it that way, but I've never phrased it that way. I think that's a really good way to think of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So you've got a team of 85 people, and up until 2020, everybody was in Pittsburgh, kind of interacting on a daily basis, I would assume. And then you went remote. Did you stay remote, or are you guys back in the office? What's the office culture like at this point?
We call ourselves a remote first company. So we're optimized for people working remotely. Our offices are open. We have a 1 day a month mandatory in office day. I'm starting to hear from my employees that they're done with working from home, at least some of them, not everybody, but at least, I don't know, maybe half feel like they're done with it and they'd like to be in the office more often. So we were just talking today over lunch about having Wednesdays be the day that, hey, you can come in on Wednesdays and people will be here, and we'll have a happy hour or buy pizza or something like that. So I think, so we're still remote. We do a quarterly company get together. So in around the holidays, we'll all go out to some houses like in the mountains and celebrate the year. In the summertime, we'll have a family get together at a park with dunk tanks and yard games and stuff like that. And then we do paintball in the springtime. And so we have this quarterly rhythm to big company celebrations, a monthly in-office day, and then people are still remote. So it is really important to us to try to maintain the culture that we have, even in this remote world. I think it's a lot harder to do now. I think you having a remote first company from the beginning, maybe that feels different, but there was a different feeling a little bit when we're all in the office that I don't think you can completely replicate. And some people just are telling me, hey, I'll go for days without seeing any humans other than, people on the screen here. And, for a lot of us, we're all social people at the end of the day, and need human interaction. And so I'm sensitive to that and want to make sure that we can help people on that front too. So.
I actually should clarify, because so my company started off as remote first. It is remote first in the US. We've got our office in Belgrade, and that is a full office that is growing, and we're getting bigger and bigger offices, it seems like every day. And so we actually are more of a hybrid in that sense. I personally have been remote for a long time, and I consider myself, even if I start going into the office every single day, with the team that's here in Virginia, I would still consider that to be remote because more team members are going to be in Belgrade that I'm not going to be interacting with in person every day. And
Yeah.
so, I guess it's more accurate probably to say that our origins were remote first. We're now hybrid. I do think though that the big difference from my perspective is, from day one, I did try to address the challenge of creating a good, real culture, despite the fact that it's going to be distributed. And a big part of that is I wrote down what the culture is. We talk about the culture when we're interviewing people. We try to talk about the culture, throughout the experience of working at the company. We don't want it to just be something that we have posted up and then never refer back to it. We also do have in-person gatherings, and due to COVID and other factors, it's always been in Belgrade, but we're hoping to have other gatherings as well. So I think it's really the only difference probably has been that just sort of that attitude that we've had where, we've always had to deal with the fact that we're not going to be all together on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's good. And I think it's so important, like you said, that you wrote out your culture and what you wanted that to look like and reminded people of that. I think it's important to go over that with folks.
Is that something that
at least?
Is that something that you guys did at OpenArc?
Yeah, we have, one of the things that came out of the pandemic was we got into Coda, which some of your listeners might be familiar with, but a platform to basically build a company intranet with our, we have our culture document, or, what our values are, what kind of culture we're trying to create written out on there. We have a directory of employees, and tell me a little bit about the employee, how do you contact them, what they do at OpenArc. We have standard operating procedures documented. So a lot of things that maybe were documented before, but they were all over the place and harder to share with new employees. We said, well, in this remote work environment where there's less of a chance to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, where's that? That motivated us to bring that all together. And I think that's been good. And a big part of that was making sure people understood our values as a company.
Yeah. So I had another question about your partnership. How do you divide labor up? Your CEO and your partner, is that the COO, or is there a different role for her?
She is president, and I am CEO. So we get together once a week to talk about overall how we're progressing on our goals and how the leadership team is doing, and review finances and stuff like that. She works with our VP of Talent Services to make sure on the talent side the operations are running well and we're meeting our customers' needs. And I'm spend a little more time on the software side of the business, just given our, that's where out of our backgrounds. So that's kind of the breakdown there. But both of us are trying to actively raise up the, next level leaders for those roles.
And that's my next question. So an 85-person company, how big is the executive team either now, or kind of what your vision for it? How many executives do you need for a company of that size?
That's a great question. We have currently 5, I would say, directors. And we're still trying to work out, do we have them over the right parts of the business? We're not organized currently into like a sales and marketing, sales leader, marketing leader, operations leader, finance, a more functional type thing. I was just talking to you about the talent and custom software development. It's a little more oriented around our various practice areas right now. So that's something that we are talking through. Is that the right leadership structure moving forward, or do we need something that's more organized around, business functions of the company?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if other people find that question interesting, but I've always been interested in how a company is able to optimize all its processes from a leadership perspective. I mean, I'm not sure what folks think now, but I tend to think that one person might have about 5, 6 direct reports, and then basically that unit of management kind of just filters down, and that's kind of how many managers and mid-level managers you might need. And and then at the top, at the very top, it's more of an open question in terms of how what's really necessary at the C level.
Yeah. I think you're right. The number that's always been in my mind is 7 or 8 is kind of the limit for any particular manager in our organization. When it gets beyond that, I think they need some kind of team leaders or help along the way. But I think the structure of your company is really important. It might be something not everyone's interested in, as you were just saying, but not having, for example, not having one person in charge of our sales strategy across all of our practices is very different than having, individual leaders in each of the practice areas in terms of how we approach the market, and you can imagine, how coordinated we are across groups and so forth. So to me, it's very interesting, and we're spending time talking about that, but again, it might not be for everyone.
Well, so I think this has been a great conversation. I think we're nearing the end of the hour, and I want to end on just a question about what are you currently working on, or are there who should be reaching out to OpenArc right now? Like what who's a good fit? Let's make a little pitch for OpenArc.
Oh, well, thank you, Will. If you're, I'll start off with something maybe very straightforward and easy. If you are struggling to find talent for your company, we have a very strong recruiting team. We've been doing this for years. We're really good at what we do. We're very transparent, and we can help you out with those positions. We're very good at that. On the software side, we just finished a project in the blockchain space. We're doing virtual reality, several projects. So if you have something, that's a custom software need to build and something that's unique, one of those types of areas, we have a great team of people who are human focused, and we want to understand the business problem that you're trying to solve and build the software for that to solve that problem. It's not so much about the code and the tools we use. It's about your business problem and solving that, or the market that you're trying to approach.
Well, that's really interesting, and I really appreciate you being on the show. I'll put your contact info for OpenArc in the show notes, so anybody that wants to reach out should have that information. Joel, thanks again for coming on Road to CEO.
All right, well, thank you so much. You're a great interviewer. Appreciate your just talking with you today.